If you've hung around the gym scene long enough, you've probably heard someone swear that you should always train at around 8 reps if you want to build muscle. Some folks treat it like biblical truth. 8 reps for size, 5 reps for strength, maybe 15 reps if you're bored. But is there any hard evidence behind that magical 8? Or is it just another bit of bro science that survived because it sounds nice? Back in the day, you'd hear old school bodybuilders say they got huge training in that so-called hypertrophy range, typically defined as 8 to 12 reps. Meanwhile, you had powerlifters grinding out heavy sets of 5 or fewer, and they'd still build big arms and backs. Then you had the higher rep crowd chasing crazy burnouts with sets of 15, 20, or even 30 reps. What's interesting is, over the past few decades, most good research suggests that all these rep ranges can produce muscle growth, provided you go near failure. Despite that, an 8 rep approach is still considered by many to be the golden ticket. Today, I want to break down why people cling to this idea, whether it's as magical as claimed, and why some folks would rather push heavier or lighter. The myth surrounding 8 reps likely comes from a mix of historical tradition and partial truths. Old bodybuilding magazines loved prescribing that 8 to 12 zone as the sweet spot. It ended up on every routine because it made sense. Moderate weight, moderate volume, a feeling of the muscle working, and you can typically keep decent form for 8 reps without your technique disintegrating. Over time, coaches and lifters saw results, so they concluded it must be the gold standard. Does that sweet spot offer anything truly unique for muscle growth, or is it simply a comfortable middle ground that avoids the pitfalls of extremes? The pitfalls of extremes is worth noting. Sets of 5 or fewer can become super draining if you do too many, and sets of 15 or more can leave you huffing and puffing with excessive lactic burn. For a lot of people, 8 to 12 reps is the happy medium, but that doesn't automatically make it better for hypertrophy. In an earlier video, we talked about how rep speed and time under tension can influence muscle building potential. No matter if you're doing sets of 5 or sets of 12, if your tempo is sloppy, you're missing out on gains. The speed of each rep and the control you have over the eccentric can dramatically affect mechanical tension on the muscle. So even if you choose to stick to 8 reps, you can still sabotage yourself by letting the bar bounce or by letting your technique degrade. When you're chasing hypertrophy, it's about that tension, not just the rep number. Before we continue, let's revisit the classic big 3 of muscle growth: mechanical tension, muscle damage, and metabolic stress. Although many lifters used to think you needed all 3, we now know mechanical tension is the real key. Damage and metabolic stress can occur as side effects, but they're not the driving forces behind new muscle. Studies have shown that you can have plenty of muscle damage or a big burn, yet not necessarily build more muscle if the tension stimulus isn't high enough. When you train in higher rep ranges, like 15 or 20, you tend to rack up more metabolic stress. That might feel like a great muscle burn, but it doesn't necessarily translate to more growth. In fact, you can experience more overall fatigue and muscle damage from those higher rep sets because you're doing so many more contractions, letting more calcium ions flood the muscle cells, and potentially leading to more breakdown. If you're still going to the same proximity to failure, there's no direct advantage in hypertrophy to that. On the other hand, with heavier sets, like 5 or 6 reps per set, you get high mechanical tension from the first rep. By the second or third rep, you're recruiting a ton of muscle fibers. That's excellent for growth, but it can also be tough on your joints or more demanding on your nervous system if you push it too far. 8 reps often feels like an easy Goldilocks zone that avoids extremes, but that doesn't mean it's uniquely superior. Some fans of the 8 rep approach argue that it's a neat balance. Heavy enough to build tension, but not so heavy that you max out on the third rep. It's also not so light that your sets drag on forever. So in practical terms, people fall in love with 8 reps because it fits their comfort zone. But if comfort is your only logic, you might be missing out on heavier approaches, which can be very effective, or higher rep approaches, which can also be very effective. The real question is, how do you handle total volume and progressive overload? Interestingly, some lifters prefer sets of 5 to 6 because they get more complete fiber recruitment from the very first rep. If you use a challenging load, like a true 5RM or 6RM, each rep is intense from the start. The load is high, so mechanical tension is high. Contrast that with a 12 or 15 rep set where your early reps may not fully recruit the highest threshold motor units until you get close to failure. Now, the 8 rep approach is somewhere in the middle. You don't need an entire set of warm-up reps to get near maximal tension, but you're also not hammering your joints with super heavy loads. However, you're still doing more reps than the 5 to 6 crowd. That means more total time under tension per set, plus a bit more potential for muscle damage, though not nearly as much as a 15 to 20 range might cause. When it comes to pure efficiency, there's an argument that sets of 5 to 8 reps can be a sweet spot to maximize mechanical tension while minimizing junk fatigue. If you do 8 reps to near failure, you're forcing your body to recruit a wide range of motor units. You're also not going to be stuck at the squat rack for an eternity. So does that mean 8 is perfect for everyone all the time? Not necessarily. Some people love going a bit heavier. Others might do better with sets of 10 if that extra time under tension helps them dial in technique. If you missed our discussion in the video about high frequency training, it's similar. There's no universal gold standard for how often you train a muscle. Instead, it's all about understanding how each method fits your overall recovery, schedule, and personal preference. Multiple studies show that wide-ranging rep counts from around 6 to around 30 can all produce very similar hypertrophy, provided you go close enough to failure and maintain decent technique. People who love the 8 rep approach often interpret that research incorrectly. They'll say something like, yeah, all rep ranges can work, but 8 to 12 is still best. In reality, the data doesn't rank one specific range as best for growth. Some folks do great at 6 to 8 reps, others enjoy 12 to 15, and many find a middle ground in 8 to 10. The differences in muscle building potential are often marginal. What usually tips the scale is how you manage your total volume, your recovery, and your progression strategy. One reason 8 reps might seem to yield consistent results is that it's moderately heavy, so you do get a strong mechanical tension stimulus. But you're not pushing your set so long that you accumulate excessive metabolic byproducts. However, you could technically get that same high tension effect with 5 to 6 reps if you want to handle heavier weights. You can also get it with 10 to 12 reps if you're okay with a slightly longer set. So the so-called 8 rep rule is mostly about tradition and convenience, not an inborn law of hypertrophy. Some lifters say you should never go above 8 reps if you want maximum gains with minimal fatigue. This camp argues that higher reps inherently bring more muscle damage, plus a bigger hit to your endurance, which might sabotage your next training day. There's some validity in that idea. Sets of 12 or 15 can create more overall soreness, especially if you do them for multiple exercises in a single workout. But that doesn't always matter, especially if you plan your split well and avoid hitting the same muscle the very next day. If you manage your volume responsibly, those higher reps won't necessarily push your recovery off a cliff. What about the argument that going super heavy, say 3 to 5 reps, is ideal for size and strength, so 8 reps is just wasted effort? Well, if you only ever do sets of 3 to 5, you're possibly beating up your joints a bit more, especially if you try to rack up enough total volume for growth. On the flip side, if you combine moderate ranges, like 6 or 8 reps, with a heavy day or two, you might get that synergy that advanced lifters often talk about. Some sessions where you go heavier for sets of 5, some sessions with sets in the 8 to 10 range, and maybe occasionally a higher rep burnout. The muscle responds to progressive overload in multiple ways. So the real question, does focusing purely on 8 reps lock you into an uncreative routine that misses out on variety? At the end of the day, your personal preference matters a lot more than many people realize. Some folks love the mental challenge of heavier sets in the 5 to 6 zone. Others get a better mind-muscle connection around 8 to 10. And some enjoy the brutal burn of 12 to 15. If you're psychologically inclined to push harder when you do 8 reps because it feels like the perfect range You might see excellent hypertrophy results purely because you're more motivated and consistent with progressive overload. Meanwhile, someone who hates 8 reps might phone it in. They'd get better results doing 5 or 6 reps, or maybe 10 or 12, simply because they're more enthusiastic and consistent. The science on motor unit recruitment can help us understand that all these ranges can work when taken near failure, but your enjoyment and technique can tip the scales for which zone is best for you. Of course, best for you might change over time. Early on, you might enjoy higher reps because it teaches you better form, like if you're learning squats or bench press, you get more practice per set. As you get more advanced, you might shift to sets of 6 to 8 for maximum mechanical tension without wrecking your joints. Then, if you want to experiment with something new or are dealing with an injury, you might do lighter, higher reps for a few weeks. None of that means 8 reps is wrong. It just means there's nothing magical or absolute about it. If you step back and look at the bigger hypertrophy picture, you realize that no single rep count stands alone. You also have to weigh how many sets you do weekly, how frequently you train each muscle, and how well you recover. Remember in previous video, we looked at how some people might benefit from training the same muscle more often. If you're doing a higher frequency routine, say hitting quads 3 times a week, maybe you can only handle sets of 8 to 10 on each day, because doing extremely heavy sets for each session would crush your knees or your lower back. Alternatively, if you're the type who hits quads once a week with fewer total sets, you might prefer sets of 5 to 6 and call it a day. The point is, 8 is hardly a must. It's more like an easy default that's safe, time-proven, and moderate. That's not a bad thing. In fact, it can be a great approach for many lifters, especially if you're not sure which style you like better. But just because 8 is popular doesn't mean it outperforms other rep ranges in building muscle. You can get plenty big and strong using a variety of rep counts, some as low as 5 or as high as 15. It's all about balancing the tension, the total number of stimulating reps, and your personal recovery needs. So is 8 reps perfect, or is that just a neat sounding rule? The deeper answer is that a rep count by itself is never perfect. The magic lies in the tension you place on your muscle, the closeness to failure, and your ability to manage volume and recovery. If 8 reps keeps you locked in, helps you push hard, and doesn't destroy your joints, then by all means make it your foundation. But if you're bored or you find you're not progressing, don't hesitate to shift up or down. Most research indicates you can build muscle effectively within a wide range so long as you challenge yourself. That means 8 reps might be convenient, but it's not a universal best. Finally, remember that consistency is your real secret weapon. Whether you do 6 reps, 8 reps, or 12, as long as you're training progressively, using halfway decent technique and controlling your rest, you'll see results. And if you want to dial it in further, recall from video number 1 that tempo matters. No half repping your way through sloppy sets. And from video number 2, we know frequency can be your friend if you distribute your volume wisely. The 8 reps only crowd often misses these bigger pictures, focusing solely on a single number rather than the overall system of training. So if you want to chase hypertrophy, keep an open mind, know your personal tolerances, and don't let myths hold you back from exploring heavier sets or experimenting with longer sets. After all, it's your body. Find the range that makes you feel unstoppable in the gym.